All right, let's dive in. We're going to talk about something you use every single day, but probably never think about: slash memory. This is the incredible, unsung hero of our digital lives. And believe me, it's a wild story of insane ambition and bitter rivalry that literally explains how we got from clunky old floppy disks to the supercomputer sitting in your pocket. So let me just start with a number: 2 cents. What do you think that's the price of? Well, that is how much it costs for 1 gigabyte of storage today. 2 cents. How on earth is that even possible? To understand that, we gotta go back in time. Because back in 1987, that same gigabyte would have set you back $80,000. No, that is not a typo. 80 grand. So, while you might hear that Moore's law is slowing down for computer chips, this kind of insane scaling proves it is alive and kicking in the world of memory. Okay, so where did this whole revolution even start? Well, it all began with this quest for the perfect memory, one that could actually remember data even when you turned the power off. And it all comes down to one single brilliant invention. This is it, the floating gate transistor, invented way back in 1967 at Bell Labs. The secret sauce is a special, perfectly insulated layer, the floating gate. The genius of it is that you can trap electrons in there and they'll just stay put, holding a bit of data for years, even with zero power. It's what we call non-volatile memory. So how's it work? Well, on paper, it's pretty simple. Step 1, you push electrons into that floating gate to program a bit. Step 2, the gate is so well insulated, they're just stuck there for over a decade. And step 3, to read the data, you just check the voltage. If there are trapped electrons, it's a 1. If there aren't, it's a 0. Simple, right? Well, making it practical was another story. The early attempts were kind of clumsy. The first one, EEPROM, worked, but get this. To erase the data, you had to blast it with UV light for 20 minutes. The next version, EEPROM, was better, but it was way too big and expensive. The world was just waiting for a real breakthrough. And this is where our hero, Fujio Masuoka at Toshiba, enters the story. He started working on a secret project, and his ambition was just off the charts. He didn't just want to improve memory a little bit. He said, I wanted to create a chip that could one day replace all other memory technologies on the market. He wanted to replace everything. Now here's the crazy part. Toshiba didn't really see the potentials, so they didn't commercialize Masuoka's idea. So Intel did. They developed the very first flash architecture, called NOR Flash. It was super fast, really reliable, and it found its killer app storing the BIOS code in PCs. And this was a game changer, because suddenly you could actually update your computer's fundamental software. NOR just completely took over the market. But the story doesn't stop there. Not even close. In fact, this is where the central rivalry really begins. Because while Intel was crushing it with NOR Flash, Masuoka was already dreaming up his next, even more radical invention. And you have got to hear this origin story. Masuoka is in Washington, D.C. for a totally unrelated patent lawsuit. And on the days when court wasn't in session, he had all this downtime. So what does he do? He uses it to invent an entirely new memory architecture, one designed to be way denser and way, way cheaper. And he called it NAND. So what's the actual difference? Okay, think of it this way. NOR Flash is like a spacious art gallery. Every single piece of art is on its own wall, it's directly accessible, it's really fast to go look at one thing. But it takes up a lot of space, so it's expensive. NAND, on the other hand, is like a gigantic warehouse. Everything is packed in super tight in these huge blocks. It's slower to find one specific item, but my God, is it dense and cheap. And that trade-off, that was everything. See, NOR was perfect for running code where you need that instant access. But if your goal was to replace spinning hard drives, to store photos, music, all our digital stuff, the only thing that mattered was cost per gigabyte. And NAND was built from day one to win that storage war. There was one problem, though. Raw NAND was, well, it was kind of messy. It wore out over time, it created errors. The big solution came from our second hero, Eli Harari of SanDisk. His team's genius was to pair the memory chips with a smart controller, basically a tiny little brain that managed all the errors and the wear and tear, making this imperfect NAND memory behave like a perfect, pristine hard drive. Okay, the next huge leap for NAND was an innovation called the multi-level cell, or MLC. And the idea was just pure genius. They thought, what if what if we could store more than just one bit of data in a single physical cell? And they figured out how to do it by being incredibly precise with the amount of electrical charge they stored in that floating gate. So look, a standard cell is simple. It's just on or off, a 1 or a 0. But with multi-level cells, you create distinct levels of charge in between. So if you have 4 levels, you can store 4 different combinations, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. And just like that, boom, you've doubled your storage capacity without making the chip a single bit bigger. It's incredible. And the results of these innovations were just seismic. In the year 2000, NOR Flash owned over 90% of the market. It was the king. But because of things like MLC, the cost of NAND just plummeted. And by 2005, it had completely overtaken its older brother to become the dominant memory architecture on planet Earth. So for years and years, NAND just got cheaper by shrinking, making the transistors smaller and smaller. But eventually, that whole strategy hit a literal physical wall. To keep the dream of scaling alive, the industry had to start thinking in a completely new dimension. You know the saying, when you can't build out, you build up. Yep, around 2015, the party was over. The transistors on a flat 2D plane got so tiny and so crammed together that they started interfering with each other. They became unreliable, the electrons would just leak out, shrinking just wasn't an option anymore. The solution was completely revolutionary: 3D NAND. The process is honestly like making a technological lasagna. First, you stack hundreds of alternating layers of materials. Then, you etch these impossibly small, perfectly circular holes straight down through the entire stack. And then, you fill those holes with the memory cell materials to create these vertical pillars of memory. The scale of this today is just, it's hard to even comprehend. Right now, manufacturers are building these microscopic data skyscrapers with more than 400 layers. It's just incredible. So why does any of this matter to you? Because this whole journey, from that one single floating gate to these 400-layer stacks, is what enables our entire modern world. Digital cameras, USB drives, iPods, iPhones, Ultrabooks, the solid-state drive in your laptop, even the massive AI data centers. Absolutely none of it would exist without cheap, dense NAND flash. And that really brings us to the main takeaway. When you stop and consider its impact on literally everything, it's pretty hard to disagree with this conclusion. NAND flash is, without a doubt, one of the most successful inventions in history. It has been such an incredible journey of relentless innovation. The latest trick was to go vertical, to build these skyscrapers of data. But it does leave us with one really big question for the future. What happens when we run out of sky? Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.